perhaps, as we said at the beginning, this is our natural state. And these people are reporting genuine, authentic things to the, that have happened to them, trying to make sense of them. Some people will have um, a space to put this in, a way to framework to sort of explore this. But many people I find in this day and age, especially young people, they don't. They might not have been brought up with a spirituality or a religion. They might not have heard of any of these things. And so when these happen, they don't really have a way to accommodate them or, into their life. And probably one of the worst things that a healthcare provider can do is shut it down, or ridicule the patient or be alarmist. So I think that is important to make sure we comment on. And even as a friend, as a family member, if you hear people speaking like this, to really just listen and just try to receive it and see, how you can support that individual.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, and we're going to have a good one today. We have a wonderful guest, a very accomplished woman doing so many different things and has such a nice way of saying, I'm just doing this stuff. And she's pretty amazing. I've known her kind of for years through the Division of Perceptual Studies here at the University of Virginia. And we will be talking about different ways of looking at meaningful coincidences from a more clinical perspective. She's a psychologist who is very good at thinking clearly. And it says things in a way that most people can understand. And hard things, difficult things. As you can see when I read her bio, that she's done a lot. She's a leader, she's a speaker, she's a thinker, she's a researcher. It's a lot. And my favorite thing is that she wrote a book with her daughter, which is like a remarkable thing amidst all the stuff that she's doing. So, Kim, I'm going to talk a little bit about you and a little bit more, and we'll get into meaningful coincidences and some of your research with prolonged grief reactions and the use of psychedelics, which is forward-looking and a very important part of all of what humanity needs to be able to understand. Currently, Kim is the Chester F. Carlson Professor of Psychiatry and Neurobehavioral Sciences at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, where she conducts research, teaches, and provides clinical care. He's a board-certified clinical psychologist who's been practicing for over 20 years. She's president of the American Psychological Association's Society of Clinical Psychology, which is no small committee or group. She's on the advisory committee for the American Psychological Association's continuing education and a fellow in the American Psychological Association's Leadership Institute for Women in Psychology. Her research involves lots of things, discovering the mechanisms of action of therapeutic and contemplative practices on human beings. I'm laughing because I've studied the practices of therapy and the mechanisms of action of psychotherapy's help. And I just realized that's what's one of the things you're doing in here too, but I'm going to try to stay away from that. She also studies altered states of consciousness and methods and impacts of such things as including meditation, psychedelic medicines, and spontaneous experiences, like near-death experiences, and I'll include some synchronicities in that. She's published extensively, spoken at the World Bank, the United Nations. I love that. professional journals, books, chapters, and as I mentioned, her most recent book is Living Mindfully Across the Lifespan, an Intergenerational Guide, which was co-authored with her daughter, Morgan. Oh, wonderful to have you on Connecting with Coincidence, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that book with my daughter, our daughter, my husband is her father, and so he claims her too. That was probably one of the best experiences of my life. And we had always wanted to write a book together and had the opportunity thanks to COVID when she moved from Washington, D.C. back home because she was working remotely and didn't want to pay the rent in DC, which I don't blame her. And we had that opportunity. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It, I know how lovely that is to do stuff
Hmm.
with your grown-up child who's grown up enough
Yeah,
to do it with
yeah,
it. It's
yeah.
my favorite thing was getting my younger son to pay for an ice cream cone once. And maybe there could be some turn. You understand.
That's
Well,
important too. Yeah.
it's very important, big deal. I remember
Yeah.
where it was too. Well, well, we have many things to be able to talk about, and I'd like to start with your psychedelics and prolonged grief reactions work, because my experience in talking with at least one other depression and psychedelic researchers is that the people who are part of those studies, the subjects, the participants, reports synchronicities after the experience with the psychedelics. And I'm just wondering if that is happening with you in this grief work that you're doing, which I can ask you to start describing first, and
Mhm.
then where synchronicity, if it does, fits in.
Certainly. This is research. I will clarify. This is research that is just beginning, the psychedelic research, and we are the first at the University of Virginia to do psychedelic Schedule One research. So we're looking specifically at psilocybin for prolonged grief disorder, and what we're looking at is exactly what you're talking about, Bernie. Is what are these subjective, we might call them subjective experiences, non-ordinary experiences, synchronicities that individuals have when they are treated with the psilocybin. And unlike some other studies that focus on the diagnosis and then giving the medicine almost in a very similar style to any pharmaceutical. It's like the black box. You have symptoms, you take the medicine, and then you measure the symptoms. And if they're gone, you say it worked. What we're looking at is what is happening with the psilocybin that specifically, back to those mechanisms, that is specifically related to the outcomes. And so I will give you an example. We know when,
Before
yeah,
you do, please
sure,
define prolonged grief reaction.
sure. That's a good point. So, prolonged grief disorder, the actual disorder is fairly new in the DSM-5, which is our diagnostic and statistical manual. That's how we classify disorders in psychiatry, as you know. Up until I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, that was not classified as a disorder, prolonged grief. So it is now. Prolonged grief disorder is literally the symptoms of grief, which include things like um, feeling sad, obviously, missing the individual. It also includes these sort of unique characteristics of yearning for the person to return. And these symptoms have to persist for 12 months or longer. So we're talking about someone who's been grieving for a very long time. In many ways, they are psychologically stuck. They're sort of arrested at this grief level. So because it is fairly new, there are not a lot of evidence-based treatments for it that are really widely publicized or considered a gold standard. That's one of the reasons we're looking at psilocybin, because we see from the literature traditional antidepressant medications don't seem to work. There are some therapeutic approaches that have made some good headway, and yet we think we can do better, maybe by augmenting with a psychedelic. So that's what we're doing with this study. We are really looking at this as an augmentation to ongoing therapy. So all of the individuals admitted to this study have to be in a therapeutic relationship. And we're really thinking of this as sort of like a boost or a way to increase some psychological flexibility and encourage exactly what you're talking about. Encourage these um, mystical experiences, extraordinary experiences, synchronicities, feelings of awe, all that goes into, what happens when you have psychedelic medicine on board. So that's our premise, is really to in fact look at those experiences, those mystical subjective experiences, as the mechanism of action. And then for individuals, we will be tracking that. So we are really getting at exactly the heart of what you're talking about, which is how do these experiences manifest and then impact functioning, grief symptoms, that sort of thing.
And when you're doing that, are you asking the subjects, the participants, right after or soon after the experience? Yes, you are. And are you following them for more of them later?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
we will be as you may be aware, or some of the listeners may not be aware, but psilocybin medicine, um, in a research study like this, you are administered the medicine and then you have these experiences. We typically administer them and then allow you to lie down in a recliner or on a bed with an eye mask. You're listening to pre-recorded music that is instrumental. It's fairly standardized across the different people who do this research. So the individual having the experience is not actively talking or discussing what they're experiencing at that time. And this is usually 6 to 8 hours of having the experience. At the end of it, we encourage people to reflect by being creative, by writing or by drawing, because many of them, it's too challenging to verbalize at that point. So we invite individuals to again do this in a way that's feels a little safer, a little more able to do so, like writing about it, or drawing pictures. And then we follow up with them the next day or so, and we have a semi-structured interview, really to look at these experiences that they had. So for instance, these experiences again are also tied to what we set for them at the beginning. When we interview them at the beginning, we ask about the loss and we ask about um, what they hope to achieve. So this is called setting an intention. And in any psychedelic study, this is an important part of it, because you want to go in with a plan. Part of it is, yes, surrendering and experiencing this, and yet you're also opening up to a question. So it's very similar to what I've seen you write about. We're really encouraging people to go in inquisitive, curious, open, and also with something in mind, so that you're sort of guided towards something, but you have to also be open. So with that in mind, we help them set an intention, experience this psilocybin, and then unpack that in a way that feels safe, and we can collect the information about what their experience was like. And we're going to do this in two ways. We're going to look at what we call sort of the macro phenomenology. It's just a fancy word for their subjective experiences. Did they have an out of body experience? Did they um, did they have synchronicities that they experienced after the psilocybin? Did they have a contact with ancestors or the deceased individual? So we want to ask these in a very safe way, sort of to get that information. We're also giving them questionnaires like the mystical experiences questionnaire, psychological flexibility, openness, connectedness, that sort of thing. Awe, the awe scale to measure, do they experience love, awe, that sort of thing, connectedness. So we're asking about that, the macro phenomenology. And then we're also going to ask them to specify what is in their view, the most salient that experience related to their grief.
And what give us an example so far? It's new. What are some of the examples of the most salient experience?
So for instance, it would be contact with the deceased.
Yeah,
So
that'd be big.
um, that would, that for many people who say, "Where is my loved one? Are they okay?
Yeah,
I'm worried about them." That can be the piece that just that awareness that, oh, I saw them again, or I felt them, or I smelled them, or I heard them, and that's very reassuring. And so very similar to what I study after death communications. When we hear spontaneous after death communications, we often see the same thing, that people say, "Oh my gosh, I know they're okay," or "I know they are still with me." It's almost like they understand that there is a continuation of the relationship, that the attachment still
it's still
exists.
there.
And
Yeah,
right. And so for that individual, where that is sort of, like I said, that is their intention, is like, I'm clueless where they are. I'm so worried about them. So their intention may be to answer that question. Where are they? Are they okay? And then if they have that experience of actually encountering them, it answers that question.
yeah,
And so this is how we think that these treatments may work. And so everyone may have the same technical diagnosis of prolonged grief disorder, and yet really have very individualized issues that have sort of arrested them or prevented them from moving forward. And of course, we're not talking about the grief going away. People, of course, still miss the loved one who has died. They still, are lonely. They change their relationship with the grief. So in this way, it's very similar to a lot of other contemplative practices or extraordinary experiences. Like I said, like after death communication. If I have an after death communication from a deceased loved one, I still miss them.
yeah,
I'm still sad that they're dead.
yeah,
I have a different relationship with that now, though, because maybe I have also gotten a sense that there is a continuation of a relationship. And so it just changes the relationship with grief in a way that you can move forward and live your life without the burden of all these symptoms. Oops, lost my earbud.
Well, that's all right. I'll talk
It's
to. I'll,
back.
hey, bud, I'll talk to you. So it's. I've been able recently to be able to have the experience of contacting each of my parents. Um, so in those contacts with having had the usual kind of plus and minus emotions towards my parents, I was able to feel really for the first time purely their love for me, each of them and both of
Oh.
them. As I imagine that would be yet even more pressing because one of the reasons for prolonged grief is unresolved anger in or
Hmm.
unresolved other issues. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. So I'll give you one example very similar to what you're talking about. A gentleman I worked with, and I had worked with his wife who died, and she was very religious, and she was ready to die. She had a very, what we call it in the business, a good death. She had a sense of where she was going, what was going to be, she was not afraid, she was ready. She was worried about her husband. and said, I'm really concerned about him because he's not as devout as I am. And sure enough, several months later, he contacted me, and he was really struggling. He was, you know, um, grieving. He was not functioning. He had stopped working. And I did not have the psilocybin study up and running at that time. He was so distracted by this ongoing worry that we finally got to what was distracting him was this rumination that his wife did not love him. And they were high school sweethearts. They had been married, 40 plus years. He adored her. He loved her with all his heart. And now she was deceased, and he had this gnawing worry that she didn't love him. She never did. And of course, now he would never know she's dead. And he could not get past this. So this was for him what was getting him stuck. As I said, I didn't have the psilocybin study, and I knew I had to do something. So we focused more on reducing the rumination through meditation and mindfulness. He was quite resistant, didn't really think this was, you know, uh, legit, I'll say. And yet he was desperate enough that we did it. So we focused on really basic meditation of helping him stay in the moment, helping him get a bit more mastery over what he focused on and what he attended to. And soon enough, he was sort of being able to do it and get into a fairly deep meditation. He then came to me. Gosh, it was probably 6 months of working with him, and he said, "I think I'm better." And I said, "Well, what happened?" And he reported that during a very deep meditation, his wife came to him. And he said it was very intimate, and he wasn't going to disclose all of the intimate details. I said, "That is fine." He said, most importantly, he was filled with the knowledge that she loved him. She had loved him. She continues to love him. And that was so powerful for him. That is what got him unstuck. Did he still miss her? Of course. And yet he could go on because that piece was addressed. And that's, to me, you can do that the hard way through, meditation and getting into that altered state of consciousness and being open to that. And it worked for him. My mind went to, well, could we do this in a more facilitated way? Can we do this intentionally through something like a psychedelic? And so that is part of what inspired this research. And we will certainly be that was that was a client. That was someone I was working with privately. That was not a part of a research study. But I've continued to, try to follow up with people, because your other question at the beginning of tracking this over time, I think is very important. The hypothesis would be, does this last?
Yeah. Yeah.
And um, and I don't have the answer to that. I think for many people, when their mind shifts like that in such a powerful way, when you experience it, you're not just told it, you don't just talk about it, you actually experience it, that seems to stick a bit more. Does it
Yeah.
stick for years? I don't know.
Yeah.
So we need to find that out. Yeah,
It's once you get over that place, you're no longer at the other place, and that's a
right.
very specific thing. But still, the past can come back and try to
Oh,
do
yeah.
something with you, and you can start going back to the ruminations. So
Oh, yeah.
that's where I'm going to wonder as you proceed and follow up people that synchronicities of various kinds can be hints of still the person loving them. And you probably know
Yes.
the book
Yes.
Signs. You probably know the book
Yeah.
Signs. It's filled with
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
examples of symbols floating around. I was walking along the Ravenna River with an opera singer who missed her father, happened to be in town because we had a coincidence together and she connected me. And she was telling me about how a fish would follow along with her by a creek like the river, and that fish somehow was her father,
Yeah.
still with her, and have the common thing with cardinals showing up as one. But a good friend of mine
Hmm.
would find dimes in odd
Hmm.
places. And
Hmm.
she's in China now, and I have the little jar that has, I don't know, maybe 50 dimes in it, each of which appeared at a time when she needed some reassurance that things were all right with her and that her father was caring about her.
That's amazing. Yeah. And when we can receive it that way, it can be so therapeutic and so validating. And I'm really curious. I don't know how to answer this, and maybe our advanced biology or advanced physics will help us answer this. But my big question is, are we built this way? And I really suspect that we are, that you know in in our ancient history, this was so important for
Yeah,
us
yeah.
to read signs, to be tuned in to synchronicities, to really perceive these. And they probably help sustain human life. And so I do think we are built this way, and that maybe in our advanced Western culture, we've minimized them, and they have to be so blatant and so huge to sort of break through, and yet that they're really there, and that we can embrace them as not some weird, strange, made up thing, but really part of the way we're meant to operate in this world.
Well, I probably did one of the first research papers developing a valid and reliable scale to measure synchronicity frequencies.
Hmm.
And you know how hard those scales are to develop. Uh,
Oh yeah.
oh yeah. And then the statisticians say you can pick this way of interpreting it or not. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
you know that's, but you come up with being able to say it's valid and reliable. And I was able to answer the question that you seem to be asking, that these are common experiences, that they are not just
Hmm.
out of the ordinary. It's just that they're common, and we need to ask people about them. The most common one, or one of the most common, is thinking of someone that you haven't heard from for a while, and they call you. That is the answer I get when I ask the people that. There's also something happens that helps me with my career or my schoolwork. So something to advance in both those areas. And these are recorded as common, as frequent in
Hmm. Hmm.
many, many people. So I'm answering your question about whether it's like only the odd ones that get hit. No, that's the ones that you hear about, but it's an everyday experience. And when you say that we're built this way, I'm going to suggest that yes, we are. And we're built this way because our minds are much more part of our environment than we are able to admit, as we emphasize the Cartesian separation between mind and environment, that we are now trying to bring together, so that the
Right.
synchronicities say, um, look, what's in my mind is also out there. And you have to be
Yeah.
able to look for it. So the people who are grieving, like the person with the dimes, is looking for the dimes, or the
Hmm.
people are looking
Right.
for the cardinals. So you get into the question of like, are you seeing it because you want to see it, or yes, that you are, but is it out there? So what I bring up to you is that the way we're built is that we are part of our environment, as indigenous people still know, and that we
Hmm.
have forgotten. So that these are representatives, examples of our being minds, not just being in here.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. And I think, your example of synchronicity is one. I also see it through these after death experiences, after death communication, these different sort of mystical experiences that if if you invite it from your friends, your family, my patients, it is amazing how often people will report it, and it is much more common. There was a Pew research poll, and most people trust Pew research polls pretty much, from 2023, April 2023, and they asked Americans about communication from deceased individuals if they'd experienced that. And it was something like 56%
Wow.
of Americans polled
Wow.
said that they had had at least one contact from a deceased individual in their lifetime, and 44% said they had had an experience like that in the past year. So we cannot really call it non-ordinary or anomalous anymore. I mean, this is and so yeah, I think that is an important message to get out there, that you're helping to get out there, that here at the Division of Perceptual Studies, we're trying to get out there, that these are not weird, strange, one-off type things that happen. They actually are fairly common. Yeah.
And it's the strange part is that our scientific viewpoint
Mm.
makes them anomalous. And that's what we, I mean, Ed Kelly and I mean, the whole thing is Bruce trying to, with near-death experiences, trying to say, hey, come on, there's data here. But there's nothing harder than to change somebody's mind who knows they're right and will just stay with it. And so we keep pushing away at that. And as you talk about your grief reactions and the contact and I'm sorry, but I got to know, for you, the very eminently thinking scientist. Oh, you think I mean, you think you've done enough research papers and done a few studies in your life so that you know what science is. Science is really asking questions, is not coming to
Yeah.
conclusions that this is the way it is, but that's what's happened. I want to know, if you don't mind, when when people make these contacts, as I did, as your patient did, where are these, or how do we imagine where these deceased loved ones are? Now, we use three-dimensional space and time. It's
Hmm.
something different, but I want to know how you, Kim Penberthy, thinks about, okay, it's a two-way street. Where are the other guys?
Gosh, I mean, I have had so many different ideas about that, and would love to go back and get a PhD in theoretical physics, because I think, I think there may be advanced knowledge that we don't have access to right now, and maybe we never will. Um, I think, if I were to say it in a simple way, I think my hunch is we're all connected, that all of this is consciousness, and we have access to this, what we think of as physical entities, physicalness, and yet really the predominant material of the world, if you will, is consciousness. And so there may be multiple forms of this, because I've also had people ask me, well, how can there be reincarnation if there's after death communication? Isn't it one or the other? Don't you like recycle, or you're sort of floating out there as that deceased entity? And I said that's a moot point when you think of it as all sort of consciousness. And don't even get me started on time. I mean, time is a construct we have, that we lay on top of everything to make sense of it. My hunch is time is is sort of not a component in this larger world of consciousness. Um, that's a construct we've laid out. So time may be, if you take time out of the equation, it can all happen simultaneously or retroactively or proactively. It's all a jumble. So
Yeah,
I think,
yeah,
yeah,
I, that's enough on that one because
yeah.
I think I just because we don't know. I wanted to hear you stumble through a very difficult question because it gives me some idea. Uh, I'm a fan of time because it helps my body adapt to this reality. It's there- there's a lot of time stuff going on here, and it's fun to step outside of it or watch it go slower or even think you can see the
Hmm.
future. I've had those experiences, but the time is for the body to like manage itself as the body deteriorates. So as we get old or expand, or whatever word you want to, you get older and things happen.
Yeah.
Uh, so I like being in time because that means I'm in my body. And being in my body is a good thing. And I think it's this thing about a spiritual being having a physical experience is much more than I think a lot of people think. It can be a beautiful, wonderful thing being in a body if we
Hmm.
understood what we have here.
Yeah, exactly.
That,
Exactly.
so that's
Yeah.
I think of these. I, I think of them floating around up there. Those because I still think in the three-dimensional thing. And the funny thing is, this woman with the dimes, I got in contact with her father as she was, so that I was in
Hmm.
connecting with him. And the funny thing is, I could just like that, I could think of Tim, and he'd show up right in my consciousness. So that's
Hmm.
where the time is like and space are like, it's a
Irrelevant.
different thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and there's the idea that maybe some of them just go further on and evolve into other places. But this is all part of the speculation. And I think what we're doing here is trying to do something in this reality that helps expand our potential for understanding what's going on around us. So let's move into your ways of thinking about synchronicity. And I think your excellent ways of analyzing or responding to meaningful coincidences. And it would be helpful if you took a moment to think about a good coincidence that we could use as an example for the questions that I can ask you about how to approach them.
Gosh, I feel like I have had so many coincidences in my life and so many insights from them.
Yeah.
It's hard to pull one. Um, and and some people will say, well, this may be a coincidence, but uh, I see it as synchronicities as well. So one big one was meeting my husband, with whom I'm still married, and the person I had our daughter with. And that story is that we were both involved with other people quite seriously and um, met in a very synchronistic sort of way. We were both visiting friends who actually were dating, and we didn't know it. And so we met up, and through this sort of weird series of events of sort of last minute plans and changing of plans and things, ended up at the same party together with our friends who were dating, and we didn't know they were dating. So we met each other, and immediately it was like it clicked, like this is the person that just was placed on this earth to be with me, and we both felt this way. So I don't know what you would call all those pieces, but it was seriously, to me, such a synchronicity that we would be here at this. It was just so highly unlikely, and I won't go into all the background of it, but that we'd be there together at the same time in the same place, in a way where we could meet and actually have, intimate conversation and get to know each other. And it's lasted, 30 years now. So I feel really fortunate and blessed, and by the universe, by God, by whatever, that we did find each other. And it took up but it was a totally different path that my life took because of that.
There's a lot to be able to ask about, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
details. The two friends, for some reason, you kept saying you didn't know they were dating, the two friends.
Right.
Somehow that seemed relevant in all of this. Could you tell, what did that mean to you?
Oh, well, that because my future husband was roommates with this other
Oh,
person, and I was staying with my friend, and I didn't know they were dating, and then we that's why we connected and had the opportunity, because they were together, and then and my husband was roommates with the person she was dating, so it was just a much more of an opportunity to get to know someone versus um meeting them randomly at a party or something like that, and the fact that I, I didn't know, and that then this man had a roommate that was my future husband. So I don't know, it just all seemed pretty remarkable to me.
well, there's a nice symmetry to it from my
Hmm.
looking at it. And roommates, each of you dating
Hmm.
without their knowing it. Something about that
Yeah.
one that I'm not going
Yeah.
to push around anymore, but
Yeah.
that intrigues me. The thing that I am most interested in that stories is that immediate knowing that each of you had.
Hmm.
That is such a fundamentally wonderful, meaningful coincidence to me. Uh, I've heard plenty of stories like that, sometimes where it doesn't lead to marriage, but it leads to having a time with someone that's
Hmm.
incredibly beautiful. It's short,
Hmm.
but it happens. They're really in sync with each other. The marriage part of it is more than just meeting. It's then you got to work out the details.
Right.
So you got the other person's got to be able to do that uh, with you, and you have to do it with them. And that people who get into romantic synchronicities I've interviewed, and I got a pair of them, both represented by the spouse, by the woman, and the marriages broke up because
Mm.
they believed that the synchronicity was enough to keep them together.
Mm.
And it's
Yeah,
not,
yeah.
it's not.
You got to have more than that. I suspect. Yes, I would agree. I would agree.
You have to have the willingness to work the details out and the conflicts
Yeah.
out. And that is the key part of it. But what is this? How do you understand that immediate knowing thing? That's I really like that part.
Well, and I think a part of it was because I've thought about it, because I've not really had that feeling with anyone else. Um, I When I first saw him, I was coming down the stairs. It was a medical school party, and the band was playing in the corner. He was the drummer. He was drumming, and he was in what I would call a flow state. He was oblivious. He was not paying attention to me, not paying attention to anyone. He is an excellent drummer, and he was drumming. And I think that a big piece of it was seeing someone in that flow state, in contrast to everyone else working so hard to impress and try to, you know, try to sort of put their best foot forward, so to speak. To see him in this pure flow state, um, and recognize that's what was happening. I mean, it was mesmerizing, and I have seen that in others, where I have this profound respect and connection to people in that flow state, to people really creative. So you think of dancers, guitar players. I've mostly seen it in sort of creative ways. Although, my mother, this is really interesting. She said she fell in love with my father when she saw him doing open heart surgery. And she said because she was an OR nurse, and he was in that flow state. He was just in his element, fully present. And I think that's how I saw my husband as well, my future husband, just fully present, just being in a way of excellence, of just sort of doing what they're meant to do, if you will. And that is incredibly attractive, to me anyway. To see that, to see someone in their element, performing at their best and just really in the moment.
Yeah. It it could be attractive to you, and whatever deeper words we
Right,
could use for that, but that didn't mean it was for him with you.
right.
So what
Yeah,
so he found something in you almost immediately that I don't
yeah,
know. I don't know if that something was. That's what I'm asking about.
yeah. I mean, he told me he recognized me, and whatever that meant.
Well, that's
So,
what I'm asking about.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the term recognize, if you look at it, is recognize, which means
Hmm.
to see again, or to think
Yeah.
again or see again. So there's something there that's a mystery that's wonderful, that you
Hmm.
already were there in his mind in some form.
Right.
That
Right.
he, and that's intriguing to me because I know that one. Uh,
Yeah. Well, and the fact that he was in this state, what I would call now like this altered state of consciousness, this flow state, and receptive and open. And I think a lot comes to us sort of that is true and genuine and authentic when we are in those states. I mean, that's part of why we use it therapeutically, to try and get people in that state where they can receive and in their, their authentic state.
that's the key word, their
Yeah.
authentic state. And that's part of what I'm trying to be able to clarify. I'm
Hmm.
using terms like vibration, frequency, and resonance to be able to say that we have a fundamental signature that is our own,
Hmm.
that is a
Hmm.
compilation of all the other vibrational things going on with us. And that is something that is our true self, and all those words we have trouble describing. But
Right.
when you're being your true self, in your true self, as he was, it's still the mystery I'm looking at now. Is from that place he was in, felt, he recognized, saw you as something he'd seen before.
Right.
And what I'm asking about, and you don't know, and I don't know either, that's why I'm asking, is that what was in him? The hints that I'll suggest to you, that's all I can do, is that
Yeah.
there are certain conformations of women that seem to be a fit a form inside of me, that
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
just fit into it.
Yeah.
And by seeing different people seem to fit into those several forms, it made me ask this question of you with your husband. What there was a form, I'm saying, in him that you fit perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, that or we had been together in a previous life, and I mean, that's to me not uh uh off base. That's possible. I think if we often run into people we recognize, a deja vu or something like that, that could be, like you said, that vibrational. It could be a number of things. uh, Somehow I love that word, recognize. Somehow you recognize, you connect, you, like you said, you fit together. um and I think, when we are more mindful, when we are more present, we have increased access to that.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people who just rush through their life. I mean, if you're rushing and you're stressed and you're not even looking up from your phone, you're certainly not going to connect or recognize.
At a DOPS meeting, probably around 2010 or 11, um, I met someone that I was very convinced was my girlfriend or wife in a past life.
Hmm.
It was just it was just that. Uh,
Yeah.
and I could even know the story somehow from having had a past life experience in which I would miss deeply the woman that I wanted to
Yeah.
be with. And so I ended up, it was in a concentration camp, and I couldn't stand being without her, and I hit the barbed wire fences knowing what was going to happen. And bullets came through me, and I was left hanging there. And that came to me when I was 15. Uh, s-
Wow. Wow.
it's because yeah, thank you. Thank
And then
you.
you actually met this woman in
Yeah,
this life.
who I think is this woman. You never know,
Wow.
but
Yeah.
because but the connection we have now is we both endured a lot of stuff. She's tolerated me in a lot of different ways, and tolerate whatever it is. We're still wonderful friends, and when we're together, it's a fusion. We're walking along to Fridays After Five, the
Hmm.
music in the summer, and we're walking together, and she says to me, "It's one body and two minds," as we're walking along together.
Mm.
And we've had experiences like that. So you don't necessarily marry the person again,
Right.
but to be able to
Hmm.
recognize, um, is something that is important for all of us to be able to tune into, because it's there for many of us to do that with someone else. But you're talking about the conditions under which your husband to be and you
Hmm.
could say, yeah, I know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep. 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 You don't always marry him, and sometimes you do. So, yeah.
And you did. And now we got a meditation book out of you, you and your
From our
daughter.
child. That's right. That's right.
That's that's a fun part of this.
And I think it also, I take this into my professional life as well. And I think it is really important more and more for clinicians, counselors, doctors to recognize that people have all kinds of experiences like this. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have some psychopathology. They might, I mean, and then that's important to check out. It also may be the case that these experiences are um, important for them to unpack and to sort of what we discussed, metabolize, so to speak, and have someone to talk about. And that I understand may not be the primary care doctor, but I think I want to just say, really clearly as a clinician that I am also, I think, like you, trying to advocate that our colleagues in healthcare, in sciences that work with people, that we open up to this idea that we can receive this information, explore it with somebody in a respectful and supportive way, and remembering that perhaps as we said at the beginning, this is our natural state, and these people are reporting genuine authentic things to the that have happened to them, trying to make sense of them. Some people will have um, a space to put this in, a way to framework to sort of explore this, but many people I find in this day and age, especially young people, they don't. They might not have been brought up with a spirituality or a religion. They might not have heard of any of these things, and so when these happen, they don't really have a way to accommodate them or into their life. And probably one of the worst things that a healthcare provider can do is shut it down, or ridicule the patient or be alarmist. So I think that is important to make sure we comment on. And even as a friend, as a family member, if you hear people speaking like this, to really just listen and just try to receive it, um, and um, and see, how you can support that individual.
the people who are listening and watching us know what you're talking about. It's a selected audience. Uh, so
Well,
they,
good. I'm preaching to the choir, as they
well,
say. Yeah.
clearly to the choir, so it's still worth repeating what you're saying. Uh, the message that each of us has, you and I, is to try to be able to get clinicians to think like this. Uh,
Yeah.
Dean Radin was talking at a thing at Harvard, uh, and I said that, that amphitheater for the psychiatry department is kind of a nice place to talk. I've been there myself. How'd you manage to get them to pay attention to what you were talking
Hmm.
about? And what he did was ask them about what would be called anomalous experiences. And so that's a place to start because half of them raised their hands,
Hmm.
and that gave
Hmm.
him the inroad to the clinicians. So part of this is giving permission to clinicians to
Yeah.
be able to acknowledge their own experiences so that they don't have to think of them as crazy. And that's why I wrote this article in Psychiatric Times to say that when a symptom isn't a sign, which means that talking about synchronicity is not a sign of psychosis.
Right.
That's the usual way mental health people do that. And so do friends, as you're talking about.
Hmm.
Friends ridicule people who talk about synchronicity. So people get happy to be able to know that they're not being crazy. It's
Yeah.
the way it starts. So that's
Yeah.
part of one of the things that you were suggesting is that there are validating non-pathological phrases that clinicians can use and friends when patients share powerful coincidences. What are some of those?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think number one, what we often call reflective listening, which is always a helpful thing to do, especially if you're caught off guard. Because I do understand also that someone hearing some of this may wonder what is going on. So reflective listening is really using the same words and reflecting back. I hear you say that your mother returned to you today and you felt like she was in the room because you smelled her perfume. And it can be just opening it up like that, so then that allows people, they feel heard. Number one, they can correct you if you got it wrong, and it's an invitation for them to give more detail. So often what happens then is people say, yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but it's happened before, and it always seems to happen when I really need her advice. And so then you can say, well, tell me more about that. So the idea would be to use these strategies that we typically use as therapists to get someone to tell us more, to unpack it a little bit more. So that can be open-ended questions. It can be like I said, the reflective listening and even maybe validating. Um, and then also not dismissing it. So really avoiding dismissal of it. Sometimes professionals don't know what to do, so they just change the subject. And that feels very dismissive to a person. So those are
Yeah,
the
those
key
are,
things I would think of.
and each
Yeah.
each one of them that you mention, starting with reflective listening, is an indirect way of saying it's okay to talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Exactly.
that's the implicit message that
Hmm.
reflect when you say it back to them, so they've been heard, and that's so. And what reflective prompts can help people metabolize a coincidence into values? I love this, into values aligned action.
Well, I mean, so some of it is really thinking about helping them understand what it means to them.
Hmm.
And often there will be an uh an ability to tell you that, so, well, obviously it means XYZ. It means mom is with me, so there's a continuing bond maybe. Or often people take it and then can interpret it into, well, it made me think of what mom would advise me to do. And then it turns into a behavior, a value-driven behavior that's sort of been prompted by this experience. And that's one way to think of it. And so when I'm working with someone who has express one of these things, and I've sort of unpacked it a little more, and I often will want to know, well, what is their understanding of this? What's a potential impact of it? Are there other cultural considerations? That's another thing to think of. What does this mean to them in the world they live in, if you don't know that already, and not being afraid to ask that. I've learned a lot about other people's culture, and you have to remember, yes, we're within these cultural groups. We also, most of us have our own personalized culture, and that we don't necessarily share with everybody, and so, but will if asked and prompted. So I often ask about that, that sort of ideological, like, well, what does it mean to you individually?
Yeah.
How do and it is always amazing to me, the flexibility, the creativity, the adaptability that people have. I mean, and they will often share with me things that I would have not anticipated.
Yeah.
Um, and and to hear that, I learn, and then I can share with them, you know how I perceive that, how I receive that, and get them to tell me a little bit more about that, and it increases, our understanding on both sides so richly. And it goes back to, though, a big part of it, Bernie, is exactly what you said at the beginning, is someone hearing them, someone being open to hear them and not ridiculing them, not dismissing them, but truly listening. And often that's the main intervention, because if you can do that well, the rest sort of follows naturally.
I'm going to add one more thing to what
Sure.
you're saying, which you demonstrate, and I'm put word on it. When they bring that stuff up, you get really curious.
Mm-hmm.
You get
Yes.
curious because you're a researcher and you know, even though these are clients of yours, they got something to tell you. And
Yeah.
so your goes up and say, okay,
Yes.
what can I get out about the nature of reality from this one, psychological and
Exactly.
generally speaking. And that curiosity that you have um, is an important part of not just being neutral about it. And well, that's what you said, but
Yeah.
I imagine from what you're telling me, you light up and say, "Hey, what's going on here?"
Oh, I am so curious and so thrilled and honored when people share with me
Yeah,
their view. It's like being able to get inside their mind and see it through their eyes and their experience. And that is just a huge privilege to be able to do
it's
that.
well, you call it a privilege, I call it fun. Uh,
It's fun too. Yes.
but you're more respectful than I am, so that's what we got. Which is it's an important thing. I'll try to learn that. But we're coming to the end of our time together, Kim, and I I am surprised to tell you that you understand the clinical use of meaning of anomalous experiences, and I'll call them synchronicities, uh, the same way I do. And I don't find that much. So
Mm.
the, this kind of isolation that I have felt clinically, even though I've written a lot about it, you have helped me feel that I know I'm not the only one, but you have demonstrated for my heart, not just my mind, that you are doing something similar, and I deeply value this experience with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We all have to stick together and open this up, because I think there's probably more out there too, you know?
It's like,
Yeah.
you know the black swan story?
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's one black swan, there's going to be some other ones. Uh, it's the question of being able to find them, and
Yeah.
I've just found one. So Thank you very, very much for our discussion today.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor and a delight.